All right, let's get started. First, I'd like to say thank you for joining us today and welcome all of you to our webinar. 2015 is the year of mobile learning. Are you ready? My name is Alyssa Ettinger, and I work as a professional services manager here at Intuition. I'll be facilitating the webinar today, so please feel free to ask any questions as Brian is speaking, and then we'll have plenty of time to cover those at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brian Finnerty, our General Manager for Technology Solutions.
Great, thank you, Alyssa, and welcome to today's webinar, everybody. The title of today's session is 2015 is the Year of Mobile Learning. Are you ready? So what I'd like to cover today is just give you a quick overview of Intuition. Intuition is a global knowledge solutions provider for large enterprises, and we have specific expertise in mobile, custom content development, advisory services, and online learning. So on to the topic at hand. Let's take a look at the mobile revolution. There's really 4 key areas that I want to cover with you today. The first is a brief history of mobile, and we've got some interesting facts and statistics to share with you there. I also want to look at compare and contrasting consumer and enterprise mobile and what that means for us. Thirdly, I'd like to look at mobile learning and where that fits within the overall picture of the mobile revolution. And then lastly, I have a number of case studies, customer case studies around mobile that I think you'll find interesting. So let's take a look at the history of mobile. The very first cellular call was made from a street corner in Manhattan on April 3rd, 1973, so quite some time ago. It was placed by a man called Martin Cooper who worked for Motorola at the time, and the recipient of his call was a gentleman called Joe Engel, who was his direct competitor and head of research at Bell Labs. So this actually turned out to be one of the bigger, what's called in-your-face jabs in tech history. But Martin made that call to Joe to let him know that this is really the first successful commercial cellular call ever made. The very first mobile phone, in fact the phone that Martin used to make that call, was a Motorola Dynatec phone, and at the time it cost a mere $3,995. A lot of money. It's about $9,000 today, so certainly not ready for consumer. Very expensive device. It weighed 2.5 pounds and it had battery power of a whopping 20 minutes. So just consider that the next time you're complaining about your iPhone or Android device running out of power. This particular phone lasted 20 minutes and then it died. It would actually take about 10 years more for the first cell phone to be made available to the public. So really we were at an early stage of development back in 1973. And as you can see from the phone, quite a clunky old model, but it was a revolutionary step at the same time. The phone itself has quite an interesting history. It's been in many movies. So if you remember the Gordon Gekko movie, Wall Street, Gordon Gekko actually used this model of the phone in the movie. The very first cellular network then took about another 6 years. It was launched in Japan, as it happens, by a company called NTT, and that was in 1979. Needless to say, this was a major milestone, a major turning point in mobile communications. So then we move on to the very first, what we would call smartphone, and I have smart in inverted commas there. In the beginning, 1994, the very first smartphone was called the IBM Simon Personal Communicator, and it cost about $899 at the time. But underneath that kind of dark, clunky exterior were some revolutionary things. So this was a handheld cellular phone and PDA. It had a touch screen which was monochrome, but that touch screen had icons that you tapped or poked with a stylus, and it's really interesting to note the apps that were on that phone. So there were email, calculator, calendar, clock, apps, all built into the phone as well. And it also had something called predictive typing, which would guess the next characters as you picked with your stylus or with your finger. So you could see the beginnings, the germ of the modern smartphone in this device. It cost about $900, as I said, and it sold approximately 50,000 units. IBM eventually moved out of the smartphone business, but they were one of the originators, the originator of the smartphone. Then we move on to the very first BlackBerry, which was a major step forward, particularly for business users. The BlackBerry smartphone, the very first one, the 850 model, was released in 2003. So 9 years after the Simon came out from IBM, BlackBerry came out. And this phone supported push email, mobile calls, text messaging, internet faxing, which seems a little quaint now, web browsing, and other wireless information services. So needless to say, this was another major step forward in the evolution of mobile technologies. And then we get to 2007, which is really when the mobile world turned on its head. In 2007, the very first iPhone was released by Apple. It's retrospectively called the iPhone 2G, and this really set the bar for smartphones. And to this very day, it's the standard by which all other smartphones are measured. It had a number of really innovative features. Among them, its capacitive screen and its tile-set interface. Alex Angove called both of those features truly revolutionary. And you can see from the image I have there, which is from an original iPhone 2G, does not look all that different from the current iPhone 6 that's in the market today. So step forward to 2014, and anyone who walks into a Radio Shack or Best Buy, you'll see that we're bombarded with smartphone choices. There are smartphones on every shelf of every variety, running different operating systems, different form factors, different features and benefits. Really, I would credit this back to the iPhone. I think the iPhone unleashed a competitive feeding frenzy in the smartphone market. It was so successful that many others tried to emulate and exceed its capabilities. And that battle continues unabated today. And it's all to the consumer's benefit, I think. So having Android, Apple, Windows fight for feature wins and UI and UX gains with every new release ultimately delivers a level of innovation to the consumer and to the business user that is ultimately very beneficial to all of us. So where are we in the modern smartphone market today? A number I want to leave with you is just a staggering number. There's 1.75 billion smartphone users in the world today, according to eMarketer, and that number is seriously increasing month on month, year on year. So we know that users are rapidly switching over to smartphones from other devices, and as smartphones become more affordable, 3G and 4G networks advance, it's becoming an even more compelling choice for people. If you look at the reach of smartphones, I'm taking this directly from a Benedict Evans report called Mobile is Eating the World. He projects that 80% of adults on Earth will have a smartphone by 2020. I'm not certain how accurate that projection is, but I think it's fair to say that the growth of smartphones is just phenomenal, staggering. The numbers are staggering, and even if we don't get to 80% of the world's population by 2020, we are moving in that direction very, very quickly. So to sort of take a breath and step back from all that I've shared with you so far, it's really clear that we've come a long way in a relatively short time span. If you remember my first slide, it was 1973 when Martin Cooper made the first cellular call. And by 2014, we've transformed whole industries, and mobile is probably the dominant technology shift in the world today. Looking at more modern statistics, Apple sold 10 million new iPhone devices in the first 3 days. You all know the stories. People slept overnight outside Apple stores waiting to be first in line all across the world. Apple continues to feed our obsession with smartphones, and people are willing to do that. They're willing to camp out in cold, wet conditions just to get their hands on the phone, the iPhone, earlier than anyone else. 2014 has been a really interesting year, and I think we'll look back on 2014 and we'll see it as the year when the mobile revolution really kicked into gear. It's what I would call a pivotal year where mobile use takes over from desktop use. So we've seen the two converging over the past number of years, and in 2014 the inevitable happened. Video is a key growth driver of mobile, so mobile internet usage is driven by a lot of video streaming, and a lot of usage is happening via apps rather than on mobile web browsers. So, you know, we're seeing that shift, and we're seeing mobile leap ahead of the desktop, and that's a theme that I'll continue to look into here in this session today. Mobile data traffic increased 81% in 2013, shows no sign of slowing down. Again, coming from Mary Meeker's Internet Trends report in 2014 this year, that's a huge number, again largely driven by video. And it's clear that the information superhighway is getting crowded. Some cable companies have, you know, voiced a lot of concern about the amount of data that's been pushed, particularly by mobile devices, and have responded in some cases by trying to throttle access for users, which is obviously being challenged. But you can see that this flood of data from mobile devices has really accelerated. What we're seeing, I think, is, again, back to Benedict Evans, the PC model is giving way, and in a remarkably short space of time. So if you look at this chart, Microsoft had a massive share of personal computing device sales, and that has dropped really dramatically over the course of 5 years. And this is not necessarily negative on Microsoft, although of course it is on their business. It's really more of a shift away from the PC, which has impacted Microsoft. It's dramatic and sudden, and within 5 years you can see that the PC business has gone from a monopoly to a minority. And while that's happened, we can see that mobile is dominating. So for every drop on the PC graph, we see mobile stepping up a level. Apple, which was a minority smartphone player, has in fact taken over the entire PC industry in that time. So by 2013, you can see Apple and the PC industry converging. And it's really amazing to consider Apple's revenue matches the combined revenue of all the global PC makers today, from HP, Acer, Lenovo, Dell. You put all their revenues together, it equals about what Apple makes every year. So the transition is kind of undeniable from PC to mobile, and Apple has been the biggest beneficiary of that transition. So the smartphone industry now dwarfs the PC industry, which again is a remarkably fast turnaround. If you look at the unit shipments, again from Benedict Evans here, you can see that PC unit sales have leveled off, and again from 2009, 2010, smartphone sales have skyrocketed in the past 5 years. So it's a dramatic shift, it's a turning point, an inflection point, whatever you want to call it. The PC industry is in decline, the smartphone mobile business is in the ascendancy. Okay, so the question I'd like to ask now is, how has this proliferation of mobile devices changed the way that we work? And I think it's changed the way that we work in quite profound ways as it happens. So now that we are in the post-PC era, and that's really what I'm arguing here, it's clear that smart connected devices disrupt established industries and create new workflows. So there's a real diversification in how we access information today. Established industries, traditional work practices are all changing, and I would argue that's because of what I call mobile first thinking, which is pervasive today. So companies are thinking about mobile first, and the PC has become not an afterthought, but certainly not a primary thought. If you look at the modern workplace, the way we work is changing, and I don't think there's any going back. There's no U-turns on this. It's a dramatic shift in the technology landscape. It's really hard to imagine going back to a pre-mobile environment. It's very clear to me and to a lot of people that the PC era is in decline, and mobile is showing the way forward. Another interesting stat is that mobile is absolutely everywhere. So mobile consumers today own an average of 3.9 connected devices, according to the Huffington Post. So we're increasingly surrounded by smart connected devices. And if you look at the next statistic for the future of mobile, by 2020, the expectation is that you'll own up to 50 connected devices. So the growth trajectory for connected devices is just staggering. And I think one area where we can see this growth trajectory really take hold is the consumer space. This dominance of mobile first thinking is really evident there, and I'm going to walk through some examples of mobile in the consumer space to kind of illustrate what I'm saying there. So in a lot of cases, and this is a definitive argument I'm making here, mobile is better. So mobile devices have transformed consumer workflows for the better. There's a simplified, more attractive workflow. It's often easier to use a mobile device and a mobile app than the equivalent browser experience. And in many cases, I'd argue the mobile experience is just much better. It's right there. You've got this very powerful device in your hand, and the mobile experience, the workflow is really smooth, simplified, powerful, right when and where you need it. So you start to look at the browser experience, the desktop experience, as sort of a pale imitation of that. Take a look at some different aspects of the consumer marketplace. So your networks, for example. It's really hard to argue anything other than social media is mobile now. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's really clear mobile is a huge part of their business, both from an advertising revenue and a user perspective. Mobile really dominates social media. It's interesting to note that last quarter, mobile devices accounted for nearly 2/3 of Facebook's revenue, its entire revenue for the quarter, and over 81% of Twitter's revenue. So mobile is the lion's share of their business today. It has completely transformed their business. And if you think about Facebook, they really came to the mobile game quite late. There was a lot of pressure on them to produce a mobile app. And to be fair, the app that they produced has been highly, highly successful and effective. What about your bookshelf? Reading books, I would argue, is mobile too. Now, I know that many of us still prefer a dog-eared copy of our favorite novel with a mug of coffee, and that's fine. But it's also clear that the ebook revolution has gathered a whole new generation of readers, avid readers. The user experience is vibrant, it's attractive. The user interface is really, really pleasing. And it's just a whole new mode of reading and exposing people to books. So whether it's ebooks or regular books, I think we're seeing pretty strong growth trajectory towards mobile in the reading space as well. What about messaging and contacting your friends? Again, 3 companies I've highlighted here. It's really clear that mobile is a huge part of their business. So WhatsApp has a user base of 600 million. Facebook Messenger user base of 500 million. Again, notwithstanding the fact that Facebook was a little late to the mobile game, they've really caught up. And then Snapchat, their user base is actually unknown, but the estimation is they have about 400 million messages sent on Snapchat each day. And this is from a company with 30 employees at the time, and about half of those employees were software engineers. So just incredible numbers, and messaging is mobile. Another good example, transportation. So the whole cab business is in the news a lot lately. As you know, with Uber, lawsuits, Lyft, etc. Hailing a cab is now a mobile experience. There are safety and legal concerns, but the days of waiting in the rain for a cab to drive past are long gone. I don't think any of us miss those days. And how easy is it to pull up your mobile phone, call a cab and get a pretty good estimation of when it's going to be there and how much it's going to cost you to get home. So that's another example of a consumer play that's just completely transformed with mobile technology. And then the last one I want to share with you is just air travel, the obvious one, your destinations, opening out the world to you. Again, this is one I feel where the advantages of mobile, the mobile workflow, really stand out. Personally, I would never go to a website now to book any travel that I do. I always go to the app. And I think paper boarding cards will end up in the Smithsonian Museum, and I, for one, will not miss them. You don't need a paper card, a boarding card. If you have the app, you can scan your virtual boarding card. The user experience is far superior to the websites in most cases. Websites are often poorly designed, bloated. They do lots of different things. The app is just does what it says. It gets you a boarding card, allows you to book flights, it tracks your gate. Really, all the information you need is presented in a very sort of seamless, easy workflow. And again, I think it's a huge step forward, and that's largely thanks to the power of the mobile devices that we're carrying around with us every day. So I've talked a lot about mobile from a consumer's perspective. The obvious question, the question I think a lot of you will be asking is, consumers are getting a great uplift from mobile, but what difference does that make to my blue chip employer, to my enterprise? And I think the answer is plenty, and I'll step through a few examples of what I mean. So if you look at the numbers on the mobile workforce, again, the projections are pretty staggering. By 2015, the mobile workforce will reach 1.3 billion, which is 37% of the total workforce according to IDC. So if you look at the Americas alone, the US, Canada, Latin America, the number of mobile workers will grow to over 212 million people in 2015. So this is a huge segment of the global workforce. Enterprise devices is another category that's really interesting to explore. So 90% of US employees use their personal devices for work purposes. That's a direct quote from the Huffington Post, 50 stunning mobile facts. So bring your own device, BYOD, it's just an undeniable trend across many enterprises, and it's interesting that that's driven by employee demand rather than the visionaries in the IT department, for example. Employees have demanded almost that they can use their iPads, their iPhones, their personal devices, and 9 out of 10 of them are using them for work purposes. So you could argue that bring your own device has gone completely mainstream, and if you look at this Avanade report on the consumerization of IT, it's really interesting to note how people are using their own devices in work. So email would be the largest use case for BYOD, but people are also social networking, using their CRM system, doing some time and expense tracking, and even some ERP with devices that they've brought into the office. So what we're seeing here is that the use of BYOD is both core to the business and it's within the daily workflow of most employees. So I think it's undeniable, again, that mobile is having a pretty substantial impact in the enterprise. What about enterprise workflows? And again, harking back to the consumer workflows, I think we mirror the consumer space here. Enterprise workflows are also changing because of mobile devices, and I think this is a really important point to make. We take some of the enterprise workflow changes for granted now. You don't need to return to your desktop, to your desk to check your email or schedule a meeting. We've got streamlined user experiences as consumers, and now we expect the same kind of streamlined user experiences in the enterprise. You book a flight for work, you can do that from your mobile phone, from a mobile app from one of the major airlines. You don't need to, necessarily go through the travel department or go back to the office and, call somebody to make that happen. You can do it yourself. Another area where mobile, I think, is really transforming the enterprise is your inbox. So email is mobile. Desktop email continues to falter just as PC usage is faltering. Mobile and webmail continue to advance. You can see how desktop email has completely leveled off and dropped out, in fact, while webmail has slowly increased and mobile mail has, basically has the lion's share of usage today. What other areas of the enterprise is mobile particularly strong in? I would say your schedule. Calendars are completely mobile now. So the immortal words, "Let me check my calendar back at the office," you don't really hear people say that anymore. Your calendar's right there. It's in your hand. It's on your phone or on your tablet. You can make appointments. You can reschedule appointments. You can pretty much do anything you need to do around calendaring and scheduling from a mobile device. And I think it's fair to say that most of us do that. Similarly, tasks, reminders, these are all mobile. I have a webinar on December 10th. That reminder pops up on all my devices. What's the first thing most people check on their phone when they wake up during a workday? It's their calendar. It's their list of reminders, their task list for the day. What do I need to get done today? You don't have to wait till you get into the office, get a cup of coffee, boot up your machine. That information is right there at your fingertips as soon as you want it. We're even starting to see mobile tackle the more traditional and I would call complex productivity applications. So Microsoft Office would be the big holdout for mobile, and with their new CEO Satya Nadella, Microsoft has obviously made a big play around Office 365. It's made Office available on the iPad at last, so you can get all of your beloved Office apps, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, on your iPad now, and it works beautifully. It's been called the gold standard for tablet productivity by ZDNet. So even though Microsoft was late to the game and resistant to kind of touch its cash cow, its Office cash cow. With the new CEO and the change in leadership, even they have come to the mobile productivity party, and their efforts are starting to pay off. They're getting a lot of good reviews for Office on mobile devices. So for all the positive talk about mobile in the enterprise, I do feel that there are areas where mobile lags in the enterprise. When you look beyond some of the hype and the momentum of mobile, there is a specific lag, I would say, in strategic thinking and actions around mobile in the enterprise. And a couple of statistics I want to share with you around that topic. With regard to enterprise mobile, 71% of senior IT leaders see mobile as strategic or transformational, according to Market Pulse, a study called Mobile in the Enterprise. And when one of my colleagues saw this slide, he made the comment that the other 29% must be on vacation. But his point is good. The majority of IT leaders see mobile as very strategic to their business or transformational, which would seem to back up a lot of what we've covered today. However, there's a serious gap here, and the gap is that only 18% of senior IT leaders have a comprehensive mobile strategy. Again, this is the same report on mobile in the enterprise. Now, this is a truly worrying statistic. So enterprise readiness for strategic mobile adoption is really abysmal, very poor today. Less than 1 in 5 IT leaders have what you would call a comprehensive mobile strategy for their business. So with all the advances we've made in mobile, both on the consumer and on the enterprise side, it's still a really stark statistic when you look at less than 1 in 5 are ready for mobile in a really strategic way. So now I'd like to move on to mobile learning, and I would say mobile learning is in a similar position. It's at an inflection point. Like the broader enterprise, learning lacks a strategic vision for mobile adoption in most organizations, probably similar percentages to what I've just shown you. Enterprise learning today, heavily structured desktop learning, I would argue is just out of touch with modern real-time enterprises. Talk to customers all the time, and they are keenly aware that the old learning paradigm is just simply out of touch with our workflows and the way we do business today, and with a lot of the people that they're hiring into their business. Mobile learning itself should really be the catalyst for transformative knowledge sharing, performance-based learning across the enterprise. It should be a transformative element there. That's really what it can be and what it ought to be. And then you may ask the question, well, what is mobile learning? What does it do? And I think its applications are both wide-ranging and beyond the scope of just learning itself. So mobile learning, a mobile strategy done right, moves into the realm of performance support, real-time job aids, helping people do their jobs better, rather than just taking learning as a separate event. Moving learning into the everyday workflow, the daily tasks that we do, making us better at our jobs, more productive, making companies we work for more competitive. And you can do that through a combination of formal learning, peer collaboration, real-time job aids and support, expert mentoring, document sharing, using some of the inherent power of mobile devices, their location awareness, and so on. So I think there's lots of ways you can use mobile learning to drive a real competitive advantage for your business. And when we get on to the case studies part of the session, I'll show you how that plays out for some of our customers. This is essentially what Intuition's technology group does. Our mobile platform delivers targeted learning wherever your people are. And our mobile strategy meets your learners where they work with on-the-go learning experiences. So mobile is designed to leverage your organization's speed and competitive strengths. And the one thing I'd say, the one takeaway here is I think it is time for every enterprise to have a clearly defined mobile strategy, and that will translate into a distinct competitive advantage for your business. Now, having said that, we understand acutely that the shift to mobile involves some tough and daunting decisions for customers. And that's essentially what we do. I mean, we advise customers on what they need to do to make an effective transition to mobile across their entire organization. It's complex, it can be difficult, but this is something that Intuition has been doing since 2007 across many industries, And the really important point to make is the competitive benefits of doing so can be tremendous. And I think that brings me on to the final part of my presentation here, which talks about some of the organizations that we've worked with in this specific mobile environment to realize some of their goals. So I've assembled a few representative customer case studies just to show you how transformative mobile can be to an organization. Many of these organizations are, it has to be said, progressive, forward-thinking organizations. They're ahead of the curve. And one of the reasons we think they are ahead of the curve is because they've tackled mobile early, and they would be in that, 1 in 5 category who have a definitive mobile strategy and are executing that strategy extremely well. The first case study I want to look at is a very large mobile deployment at a major telecommunications company. And let me just tell you a little bit about the scenario here. Their objective was to train 125,000 retail staff on all the new mobile devices and plans, ironically enough, that are being released to the market. So the training that they had needed to reach employees where they are, where they work. Their existing LMS isn't in a position and wasn't in a position to do that, the corporate university. Many of the learners you're trying to reach work in retail stores which have no desktop environment. They simply don't have a PC or a machine that they would call their own. These employees are purely mobile. They can't access the learning management system, the sophisticated corporate university that's in place. They don't take courses online on the desktop. It just doesn't happen. But they do have a substantial need for job aids and real-time information around new devices and plans. This is content that's changing all the time. Every time a new phone, device, operating system update is released, these employees need to have access to it, that information, so they can do their jobs better. So this company came to Intuition to deliver just-in-time mobile learning at significant scale to over 100,000 employees. And with any group that large and distributed, obviously you have acute user management and reporting needs that your vendor needs to manage and take care of. So that was all part of the overall engagement, is part of the overall engagement. So I would say this is a company with a massive training need, a new type of employee who is purely mobile and constantly changing requirements, content need, and can you solve that problem? This is a real strategic problem for their business. Can you solve that problem using a mobile platform like Intuition? And the answer is a definitive yes in that case. Second case study I'd like to draw your attention to is a mission-critical mobile learning initiative at a global oil and gas company. So if you think about the oil and gas industry, the objective here was to use a mobile player to deliver technical training to well engineers, so people who are out in the field, on oil rigs, distributed all over the world. They lack internet access or secure internet access, stable internet access. You need an offline player for those remote environments. They have a heavy reliance, as you'd imagine, on mobile devices, particularly iPads. And they need access to rich technical content in manuals and mechanical diagrams, and they need that to do their job. So to figure out a piece of equipment or fix or troubleshoot something, they need access to that information instantly. They may not have a solid internet connection or cellular connection, so an offline player is particularly important in this scenario. And this is truly mission-critical training, safety, compliance content that needs to be delivered to these employees. So it's a tricky use case, but actually it's a perfect use case for a mobile platform, a mobile learning platform. And what Intuition did in this scenario is delivered mobile learning, both online and offline, at the point of need, with robust reporting and compliance requirements that plug back into their, into their homegrown LMS corporate university. So the mobile piece is sort of standalone. It delivers that particular service to the business, does it very elegantly at scale, and basically solves that business problem for that particular customer. Here's an example of some of the content that people would be taking using our mobile platform. It's deeply technical training. It's available on tablets, on phones. There's lots of features like notating content, testing, obviously reporting, moving through deeply technical information. Some of it is EPUB information in PDF format and other types of publication formats, but deeply technical content that's packaged for that particular use case, a remote well engineer with a real need for specific technical information. Okay, and then the final case study that I wanted to share before I open up for Q&A here is a military case study. So in this case, this was a particular example of BYOD, bring your own device, and mobile learning to support troops in the UK military. So the objective here is to provide mobile learning for soldier training and deployment. So as you'd expect, a lot of soldiers lack access to desktop computers. They're purely mobile again. Training time is limited and often opportunistic in nature. They have other things to do as well. But the need for training and mission sharpness is great. So the Army in this case decided to leverage BYOD to use personal mobile phones and tablets and use the Intuition platform to deliver training where it matters in the field to their soldier population. One of the key challenges here was adoption and engagement, so the content had to be engaging, it had to be useful and relevant, but it also had to be available, on a device that they were familiar with using. So the Intuition platform basically delivered that content to the Army so that soldiers could use whatever devices they had access to take their training. And we did see a huge increase in usage and adoption. Another great example of how mobile can just be a turnkey solution for a specific problem that a customer is having. Okay, so in conclusion, a quick summary of where we are around mobile learning. I think it's a good fit for any modern active workforce. Performance support and real-time job aids drive competitiveness. Adoption thrives when users learn on the go at their convenience. And there is a definitive shift. I think I've tried to articulate today that there's a definitive shift towards mobile learning in the enterprise. And my one point would be Intuition can help you make that shift to mobile. That is what we do. That's one of the things that we do in the technology group. I'd argue that mobile learning is fast becoming the standard for progressive forward-thinking organizations who are looking to gain a competitive edge. And it's something I think that we'll talk about a lot into 2015 and the years beyond. But to summarize my argument, there is no going back. The mobile revolution has happened, and I think 2015 is going to be a very big year for mobile, both on the consumer and on the enterprise level. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Alyssa, and hopefully we'll take some live questions from the audience now.
Great, thanks, Brian. We had a couple coming in as you were going through, and everyone please feel free to send through questions while we're going through this Q&A process as well. So we'll start with the first one I have here is mobile learning as trackable as desktop learning?
The short answer is yes, absolutely, and I think it needs to be, because a lot of your objectives with a mobile learning implementation are not that different from your more traditional desktop bound or LMS based learning. You still want to see what users have completed, which pieces of content. In fact, if anything, the data can be richer, so you want to know what devices they're using, what operating system they're running on their mobile devices. Are they using tablets? Are they using phones? But you still need the basic learning information. Did they complete that particular course, job aid, piece of performance support learning? How have they applied it in the real world? What kind of feedback can you get? So there's lots of really cool feedback loops that you can build into mobile learning now, so that people can tell you on the fly what they think of a particular training sequence or the value of a particular training sequence. But ultimately, your learning data, your reporting is just as important for mobile as it is in any other environment. And what we do at Intuition is we plug into all the major learning management systems. So if you're using Saba or if you're using Cornerstone or whatever you're using, our mobile player and our mobile platform is just a seamless layer on top of that. What we specialize in, what we focus on, is delivering a great mobile experience that's secure, scalable, tried and trusted, and it will just take that piece of your strategic plan and execute on it. So the data can be exchanged and shared. It's fully SCORM compliant, as you'd expect, so we can plug right into LMS data and it's as if the content has been taken on a native LMS in many cases. Or some customers, want us to provide the LMS as well, so we're not porting to another system. We're just running it on our own kind of lightweight LMS. So I think either is possible, but to answer the question, it's absolutely key that mobile learning is just as trackable as any other kind of learning.
Great, thanks, Brian. We had another question come in just now. What are the security concerns when using mobile, and how are they overcome?
I think this is part of the argument on, this is a tough decision. It's a tricky decision for a lot of people. Mobile can be a bit scary. You're opening up learning on multiple devices. It brings up questions around device management, security. To be fair, all of these questions have been solved and answered at this point. So in the case of Intuition, our mobile platform works with device management software, whatever that may be, MobileIron or whatever your company is using. All of the content is encrypted. We can delete user accounts instantly. You can wipe data. The transfer of learning data between the management system and the devices is encrypted. All the content on a device is encrypted. So security concerns are legitimate, but again, we've been in this business for a long time, and we have worked out a lot of the the kinks and challenges there. It's just a headache that you shouldn't need to have if you're implementing a mobile learning platform. Security is obviously critical. It's a key part of the system, but it is something that that can be dealt with and is being dealt with by Intuition and other companies on a large scale. So if you take the telco example that I gave you, the 125,000 employees, a lot of churn, a lot of turnover with those employees, that's a massive data management, user management challenge, and it just works. I mean, we just make it work.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian. Let's see. We have a couple more. What would you consider the number one benefit of moving towards mobile and away from traditional desktop platforms?
I would say, for me personally, there's lots of answers to that question. My personal answer is the number one benefit is mobile can move your learning organization away from what might be considered another cost center or just another box to be checked, or whatever, into something that's really focused on performance support, because you're delivering learning right into people's hands when they need it, where they need it. It can be an extremely powerful form of learning. So the well engineers example I gave with our oil and gas company, the only way to get learning content out to those people at the point of need is using an offline mobile player. That's just the only way to do it. So I think that's where the power of mobile learning becomes really apparent. You can influence people's behavior in the field. If you're a sales training manager, for example, and you want your field to be updated on, your latest sales techniques, offers for customers, it doesn't have to be learning. It can be real performance support, real job aids, but you're delivering that content in a secure environment right to your to your user population, right to the devices that they use every day to check their mail, to check their calendars, and look, there's an app they can jump into and refresh their training on any particular area. So my argument there is that it's real performance support, and the upshot of that is competitive advantage. If you can get that information to your field faster in a secure manner, your employees are more knowledgeable, they're better equipped to do their jobs, they have a significant competitive advantage over your competition.
Okay, and then I have one last one, unless we get any more while you're going through, but what do you see the growth in mobile data usage, from here? Do you see it continuing to grow or maybe leveling off a little? I guess, what are your thoughts on the future of mobile?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see it. It's certainly hard to see it going backwards. It's even hard to see it leveling off at this point. I mean, the use of mobile devices is just, it's getting more and more ubiquitous. I mean, more people are, you saw the statistic I shared there, we have 3.9 connected devices today. That will, by 2020, move up to almost 50. We're putting sensors in appliances, we're putting sensors in stores. Your phone is kind of the hub, or your tablet is the hub of that experience. It's always with you. It's aware of where you are and what you're doing. So to be honest, I can only see the demands for mobile data increasing. You look at companies like Netflix, Hulu, and what they've done, transformed the way we consume media. A lot of people don't have cable TV subscriptions anymore. So it's just, I can only see it increasing. I can only see it growing. And I think we're quite a ways off from a leveling out process, although ultimately that will happen. I mean, it can't grow forever, but I think that's quite a long ways off.
Okay, great. I think that is all the questions that we have for today. Obviously, if there's anything else that anyone has after the webinar is over, feel free to send Brian an email or our marketing team, and we'll make sure that it gets to Brian or the right person to, get back to you on that. Otherwise, thank you for joining today, and we really appreciate your time.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time also, and enjoy the rest of your day.